So yeah, I mean, like when I see a patient, you know, and I was just talking to Thad about this, like when I prescribe a medicine for, say, take something really boring, like high cholesterol,
Mm-hmm.
like they, you know, people are trusting me and they have faith in me, they have faith in science, and they have faith in the process of like medical decision making. But they have to have faith, right? Like I'm following the evidence, but they have to have some sort of faith. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is overlap between, I mean, that's a small example, but I guess my point is when you're taking care of patients, just like when you're taking care of your community in a religious setting, you follow the evidence and the science, but you also have to understand the person you're speaking to. You have to understand their values and where they're
Mm-hmm.
coming from, and there has to be a relationship between the doctor
Mm-hmm.
and the patient. It's not just like do this because I said so. And I'm assuming
Right.
that in your world, you can't just tell people here's what to believe, here's what to believe. You have to show them, and you have to tell them, and you also have to lead.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. You have to do all those things. But before I get into all of that, I just
Please.
want to say, Lucy, my family, especially, we have truly enjoyed your newsletter. We love your daily
Oh my gosh,
advice that comes out. No,
you're so
we really
cute.
do.
Thank you.
Because it's helped us manage this whole situation. And I primarily manage everything in my life through faith. So I'm answering the question. But, you know, initially I would say that, you know, faith doesn't exclude medicine and science. I think from a faith perspective, God gives us those things to help us live healthier, more productive lives. I really do. And I would say the advice that you give, or at least just, it's not even always advice. It's really just a lot of times just reporting facts. And sometimes we can draw our own conclusions, or if there's a conclusion that you already draw, then we're still free to accept or reject it. But I would say that for my family, especially my wife, who has a tendency to at times be anxious and to deal with that emotion, I too, in this pandemic, have found myself dealing with emotions that a man of faith doesn't really like to talk about publicly, right? But I've been afraid, I've been anxious. I think I've had 2 panic attacks since March, and that was something that never happened with me before. And so when we get information that you've been disseminating, it's really helpful in terms of alleviating some of that fear, some of that anxiety, because it's not relying on political leadership, which, you know, let's face it, it's not always trustworthy. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, or even if you're right in the middle, it's not always trustworthy, and everyone has a slant that they try to give it. So when you're getting straight facts from someone who is really on, I was thinking earlier this morning, are you really on ground zero or like ground one? I'm not sure, but wherever you are facing it every day, dealing with patients and seeing this disease and the virus up front and close, when you get information from someone like you, it really does help with those issues of anxiety and fear. And so faith plays a role, even if that faith that someone has is not in the God that I believe. They've got to have faith in something. And while I would certainly recommend them to choose the faith that I've chosen, which I've seen work in my life and the lives of countless others, even as a faith person, you still have to, I think, trust science. You do. It's not, you know, I think about so many things from the Bible come to mind, but there's one particular scripture that guides my approach to this particular issue. And it's that God has not given his people a spirit of fear, but one of power and love and of a sound mind. And in that sound mind part is basic following instructions that your physician or medical professionals give. And so getting good information from trustworthy people who don't have any ulterior motive other than to see you well, that's really what we need. We don't need all the other stuff. It's more harmful than helpful. And so you as a internal medicine and and really your mental health pieces have been so helpful. And I like the balance between the physical and the mental. But what you're doing is, from my perspective, it's really ministry, because you're serving, you're serving in ways that have stretched you, where it's required more, it's required more of you than you probably have ever had to give in your profession. And to go that, not just extra mile, but extra 5 miles, is something that we as ministers try to do every day as well. And so you have to, I think you should really, you and so many others who've been working hard on this in your professional context, you should really receive a great round of applause, because
oh my gosh, Bernie, that means so much to me. It means so much to me. I thank you so much for saying that. To me, it's really, and I think this is probably what informs your work as well. Like it actually is it's meaningful for me. Like I get out of it, thinking that I can reach somebody who maybe doesn't have a doctor, who hasn't ever thought about their emotional health, who hasn't ever faced the uncomfortable truths of their internal world, or they haven't really processed things that are relevant then to their health and how they feel every day. Like that is gratifying. And to reach people beyond just my patient group it's been gratifying to me. It also feels like a moral obligation, not to sound holier than thou. Like I'm just, I'm just a single person, but like, if I'm going to be distilling all this information every day, reading, all the news that's coming out and looking at primary data as it comes out, the studies, and I'm, talking to my colleagues up and down the East Coast and across, actually overseas, like I feel like then, instead of just putting it in here, I should dispense it. And I think,
and it's been helpful. And keep doing it.
I am going to keep doing it, because it really is meaningful. It's meaningful for me, and it's just this sort of positive feedback loop. And I would imagine that's what informs your work. I mean, one of the reasons why I went into medicine, and maybe why you went into your role in, what am I calling you? Am I calling you a minister?
You call me Bernie.
I call you Bernie, but I respond to hey you, Dr. Lucy, which is like a little bit akin to Dr. Phil, but
I'm sometimes Reverend Dorsey, sometimes I'm Pastor Dorsey, sometimes I'm Apostle Bernie. It varies, but between you, please call me Bernie.
No, I will call you Bernie, but it's like, do I say that you're a minister? Do I say you're a reverend? You're a pastor?
I'm a pastor.
Okay, but like one of the reasons I went into medicine, maybe the same reason you went into the ministry is,
right.
Like I'm learning every day, but it is because it is stripped of an agenda. Like I don't have it, right? Like that's part of why.
I think that's your approach, right? But
like I don't have an agenda. I mean, I need to make a living.
Yeah, well.
But I'm not gonna I have my agenda is this. My agenda is help other people be healthier mentally and physically.
Let me just share a quick story with you,
please,
so that I can continue encouraging you.
Oh my gosh.
This is something that I haven't really shared with anyone publicly, but I'll definitely share it with you. I won't
share it publicly unless you want me to.
No, it's fine. So I shared it with the church a couple weeks ago. So as you know, I do a lot of overseas work, primarily in Uganda, East Africa, now Kenya, India as well. But the primary work has been in Uganda. And so in Uganda, the churches are still closed. So imagine what that means for pastors in an underdeveloped country to not have their congregations together for 5 months. People who are in ministry, they earn their living by the offerings and things that are brought to the church. And so the amount of suffering that is going on in that part of the world from people in my vocation is really, it was already on the margins anyway, but now it's really, really low. And so our support has turned from, raising funds here to send me over there for preaching campaigns and that kind of thing, or to support the school that we have started and support, to simply whatever we have received, sending it over there so they can survive for food. So I give you that backdrop. So my friend, who I've known now for more than 10 years, and I've been on 11 trips to Uganda preaching the gospel. That's what I do. And he told me that they don't know what else to do, because they've tried so many different ways to get the churches open, but they understand there are health risks, but they see other things that are open that aren't churches, and they're trying to figure it all out. So they decided that they needed to file a formal petition with the president of the nation. And so to make a long story short, he contacted me and said, look, I know you used to be a lawyer, and I know where your heart is for God and his people, and especially here. Can you help me put together this petition? And so I drafted the petition, and in it were probably 19 or 20 different articles. And we decided that we would make sure that this petition to reopen their churches involved following certain standard protocols. And much of the information that I included in that is based on some of the facts and information that you have presented. So whether the petition is, I think, making its way through the proper channels, and it's not that it's the only petition probably that the government has received, but when you go that extra mile, and when you don't have that agenda other than to make sure people are well and living a healthier, better life, you don't know how that act can be multiplied somewhere across the world, benefiting someone who's never met you, who has no idea you even exist. And when you're in it for the right reasons, those are the kind of great things that can happen. So I say that to say that it really does make a difference. And in that way, I may be in a pulpit on Sunday preaching, or 2 hours having a prayer service last night, whatever it might be. But in so many ways, what I'm doing in terms of faith is not a whole lot different than what people like you, who are in it for the right reason, it's not a whole lot different than what you're doing.
I so appreciate that story, and I'm going to just file that away, because I mean, you have to keep me posted, Bernie, on what's happening in Uganda. I mean, what is the status of the petition now?
So the petition is still being considered. After it was submitted and circulated, they still have not opened the churches, but I think it's more of a progressive approach they have to take. And I told my friend, you've got to be patient, because one of the things, well, let me back up for a second. I'm not sure in Uganda what their number of, say, ventilators are that they have available. But I was reading a couple of months back where some countries in Africa, an entire country, some of them only have 2 ventilators or 3 in the entire country. So
the stakes are a lot higher.
They are.
In opening churches. At the same time, the losses are enormous, and we have to face the fact that the losses are enormous on both.
The loss is there. The loss is there. And say in Kenya, where I have another ongoing project and contact, the effect there seems to be more so not the virus and then the disease after it. It is hunger, because it has so disrupted the economies of the world that those who were already living below the margin have been suffering. I mean, they have literally had no food to eat. I hadn't talked to my friend in Kenya probably for several months, when one day, I think in March or April, I felt like God told me to check on him. And when I did, he said, thank you so much for checking on me, because we have no food in our kitchen. We have nothing, literally nothing. He said, people here are starving. And so it made us shift our international ministry approach to basic, okay, let's make sure people have enough to eat, as opposed to other projects. And in some ways, I think it's the way that you guys in medicine do this virus response. It's you do things that you normally do, but then some part of the metric changes, or the field conditions change, and you have to adjust and focus, say, on something else. But
Yeah, I mean,
so many parallels.
It's triage, right? It's like,
Yeah.
you have to meet the basic needs first, and then go from there. And you have to constantly be flexible and pivot.
Yeah, totally.
Tell me about, like, tell me about your, is what I call it, a parish here, your church here,
congregation,
your congregation. Like,
parish.
tell me,
Yeah.
like, just sort of like, tell me about it here, and like, how many people is it? And then I want to hear about, like, how have you had to, I mean, I'm assuming, revolutionize your practice over the course of the last couple months.
It's been different. It's been different for sure. So, and I really have been in this location where I am now. So in Southeast DC, I've been there for just short of 2 years. But when I first went there 2 years ago, I just went because the church, I knew the pastor, and the pastor had actually called me and said, I'm down to 2 members. And the pastor lived like an hour and 45 minutes away, one way, and said, I know you've got a church somewhere. I think we were in Beltsville at the time, so we were out in Prince George's County. He said, I know that you have a church close by. Would you pastor my people? Because I think I'm going to have to shut this down and do something closer to my home. I said, okay, I could do that. But at the time, my church, we were maybe 10. It was the church I'd started.
In Beltsville.
Yes. So we started it in Silver Spring, moved to Beltsville. But I've been for 5 years praying to get into DC. I've always felt that my calling was to be in this city. And so that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
So,
and also that you were a lawyer before this. Anyway.
I would have to lay on my couch to tell that part. So I decided, I said, well, look, we meet at 2 p.m. on Sundays. If people aren't coming to that location near where they live, they're not driving 35 minutes at 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, no matter how great of a preacher I might think I am, or people might puff me up to be. No one's coming out there for that. And I said, I've always tried to get into DC. And he said, wait, you want to be in DC? And I said, yes, I've been. And so he said, this was in maybe November or December. He said, tell you what, January 1st, 2019, just come here and do whatever you want.
So January 2019.
Uh-huh.
Not that long ago is when you came in.
It's when I came into this one. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I know. Okay, got it.
So I started my church in 2014.
Yeah.
And so we were there, but I knew spiritually that there was going to be a transplant, a great word, I guess, in this context. But that was literally the word that I knew God said to me, was that my church was going to be transplanted. So, and that was a year before I found my way there. So we went there. It was really just me and Erica and the boys. So we went on Sundays, and I would just go and try to support what the pastor was doing and try to encourage people and just do whatever I could to help that particular Sunday. And so eventually we would wind up getting maybe 7 or 8 people or so. And then the clear indication was that I was going to take over as the pastor of that congregation. It's in Southeast DC in a very historic church. And we decided ultimately that we thought God was leading me to serve as the pastor. And so recently that change officially took place. So we have been now at, if we were in person, it probably would be somewhere around 20 now. Mm-hmm. So it was 2 or 3 people up to then about 8, and then about 12, and then 15, and then 20. But now that we've had to adjust and do everything virtually, we have probably 30 or 40 people easily online now attending the services. So it's
that's a silver lining, right? I mean, it's like, you never thought you'd be, preaching on a computer, right? But
no, I didn't. And the thing is, churches are uniquely vulnerable to this virus spread, right?
Yeah,
because
well, that's it. That's why one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is like, churches are essential institutions in our society,
yes,
no matter where you are in terms of your faith, or like they just are.
yeah.
And so, and of course, as you know, like the super spreading events back in March, some of them happened in churches. Like it was the one in Washington State.
In Washington, yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and so you come to church, and normally you hug each other. There's fellowship, and there's singing, right? And I tend to preach somewhat animated and
I can imagine
loudly.
if I was going to take a scientific, like a sample of your respiratory droplets, because you're a passionate speaker with a good, you project well, you might spread some virus, Bernie.
I think I probably would.
I would too. I talk really loudly.
Right, and I'm trying to really spread the good news, right?
You spread good news, but I'm the same way. I talk really loudly and forcefully, and I would, if I was infected, I would spread that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's what would happen. So I definitely took the cautious approach, because at a time, you could have less than 50 people still gather if you could maintain the distance. Now, we couldn't have done that. Number one, we didn't have 50 people, but we had less than 50. But so our church it's Historic St. Paul Church in Southeast DC. It is on the National Registry of Historic Places because in 1924, it was designed by the first Black licensed architect in DC.
Is that right?
It was. And it's also, the church itself is the only DC location of the oldest incorporated African-American denomination in the United States history.
Oh my gosh.
So it really is a historic place. And so I definitely feel blessed to be there. And part of my job really is not part of, but if not the main thing that I'm doing now is, as a pastor, it's really caring for the flock. It's caring for the people. And so knowing the risk factors that are there for African Americans and people with underlying conditions, that's our entire congregation of people, young and old, right?
Are your parishioners 100% African American?
For the time being, yes.
Yep.
I see that changing, and that's a whole other conversation. But
yeah,
this other stuff that's going on in the United States has actually created great opportunity for bridging some divides that have been there. The neighborhood where the church is completely gentrified. It's completely flipped from what it used to be. But there are so many well-intentioned, good-hearted people that if we were able to physically open right now, I have no doubt that some of that would change. And so I'm looking forward to that day happening. But in the meantime, it's how do you care for people that you normally can give a hug to on a Sunday? Someone that is struggling with any number of issues and challenges in life. You may be the only hug they get in an entire week. And so people who are alone, people who are depressed and have so many other challenges in life, they need the fellowship and the camaraderie of their church family to really make it through some things. So this whole time has been really teaching people to put their faith into practice. That's what it is. It's like you study all these years, say as an epidemiologist, an infectious disease expert. Well, now's the time to really put all that into practice. And it's really the same kind of thing we're trying to get people to understand now. This is what your faith is for. It's for good times, but it's for struggle as well.
So it makes a complete sense. I mean, how do you take care of your flock when you can't hug them in person and you can't be with them? I mean, part of the parallels I'm seeing, and I've reflected on quite a lot during the pandemic between religion and medicine, are that my job, like your job, is to take care of people, like the whole person, right? I mean,
mm-hmm.
It's to consider the fact that you're giving people information and you're giving them stories and you're trying to lead them the right way, but you also have to think about them as a person. And that hug,
yes.
Just like the hands-on touch of a doctor, which there's like it's not something that that is, it's not required in science to touch someone, but it does have an impact. And
It
what do you
does.
do? How do you, I mean, there's no substitute for it, right? But
No,
like,
no, there isn't.
but how are you trying to compensate for it?
So I think there are a few ways I would answer that. First, just to go to your touching example, not just the hug, but in my faith tradition, we believe on the laying on of hands, we call it. You lay hands and pray. And so I've seen countless, I can't even tell you the number of people, especially in Africa, who don't have access to great healthcare and medicine. I have seen at the gatherings we have there, large scale gatherings, literally I have seen people completely miraculously healed of what they have. I've seen tumors disappear. I've seen hearts that were so literally inflamed that the chest would already be sticking out. I've seen that shrink. I've literally seen someone who was blind in one eye, they see. And these things happen when we, as a believer, lay hands on them and pray. I've seen it. I'm a witness that is true. So one of the big challenges for me, having a ministry that involves healing, is I can't lay hands on anyone. And that is hard for me. And it's not that that's required necessarily for someone to receive God's blessing in that way, but it's something that is proven, at least in my own experience. I've seen it work. So not being able to lay hands on someone is significant as far as my ministry is concerned. So you make adjustments. And I would say, for me, there have been a few adjustments in particular. And I'll take them not necessarily in order, but one of the things that I've done is, starting in March, as someone who's probably I'm kind of big boned, and I'm never going to be thin like that, but I decided that, okay, I definitely weigh too much, and if too much weight, and I do have hypertension under control with my medicine, but I realized that in order for me to be in a position to help serve the people that I'm supposed to serve, I needed to make some changes in my own life and take some steps to be physically healthier in order to better serve them. So when the whole pandemic started, it was clear to me that I needed to make some changes in my own life, hoping that would then give me the physical stamina that I need to do the work that I've got to do. So in that process, there were a couple of other men at the church who said, hey, I want to do some things too and try to get myself back together. Now, these guys are in much better shape than I am, but we all kind of joined together and held each other accountable for a couple of months in terms of what we were doing. The growth then out of that made me then kind of tell other people in the congregation about it. And so now
that's awesome, like leading by example.
That's what I'm trying to do. And so then there are a couple of people now who said, yeah, I've been, one of the women last week was like, yeah, I've been going for a 3-mile walk now a few times a week. And so we try to do those things to show the importance of our physical health as it relates to, I've got to keep moving this thing that keeps popping up on my screen, our physical health that are important also for our spiritual health. So trying to take care of myself physically a little bit better than I was before. I still have problems being up in rural Maryland, where there's a great fruit stand that it's not the fruit that's the problem, it's the baked apple pies and cherry pies that they also offer. So
that's what makes you normal, Bernie. Like if you could easily avoid those things, I would think you're a little weird,
Yeah, well, I don't easily avoid them unless I've gone for a nice run. Then I don't have.
It is funny because you're like, if you went for a nice run, you're kind of like, wow, I want to kind of pay this forward and keep it going. That's still, you are human. You are human.
Yes, I am. So in March, that's what I started doing. And so I started just with walking and then a little bit of jogging. And so I went a month actually not doing anything because we traveled on an RV out west and came back. And so I was trying to get my bearings straight again to exercise. But I'm basically up to running almost 3 miles, and I try to
Oh my
do
gosh,
it
that's awesome.
a few times a week. Yeah, it is. It's much better. And so it gives me a clearer mind, right? And I think it's helped encourage some others. But the other thing it's done in terms of giving me a clearer mind and also having, I think, just I feel better. So I can also accomplish more in terms of what the work is I have to do. It's helped me with my prayer life. And I would say that's the next part of what we've had to do in terms of our adjustment. Yeah, everyone knows you're virtual. That's the main adjustment. You've got to have service on some kind of meeting platform on Sunday morning. But that doesn't allow me to go lay hands on people. That doesn't allow me to do some of the other things I need to do. And so I think for the first time in some time, I realized that what I thought was an adequate prayer life as a pastor, this pandemic has made me realize the importance of engaging in that even more. And so that's what I've done. And that's what I've been trying to teach our congregation to do. The key to so much of what we need in our lives as people of faith revolves around prayer. And so this pandemic, as much of a challenge as it's been, as I said, it's some benefit because now we're reaching more people than we otherwise would. And then secondly, the increase or the improvement, I should say, in our church's prayer life individually and corporately has caught fire.
So like, what do you mean specifically? Like, and then like the improvement in your prayer life, you mean in terms of like content?
I think the content absolutely has been adjusted. And also the frequency.
Yeah.
Because think about it, you are, and those things actually tie together, because if you're a person of faith and you're reasonably concerned about this virus, as you should be, then you walk out of your house, you don't know what is lurking in the air. You don't necessarily know how you might get it. You just don't know all the facts. We have a good idea of what we can do to help, but there's no apparent 100% way of protection from getting it. So as a person of faith, it causes you now to search the scriptures. Okay, what does God say about these types of situations? And if you go to the 91st Psalm, it speaks directly about God's protection in situations that you have no control over. And there's one verse in there that is something that becomes part of our prayers now. We pray Psalm 91. So to also answer your previous question, another thing we've done in terms of the prayer life is I have 6 a.m. prayer calls Monday through Friday.
Oh,
so
wow.
We get up early and we have prayer from just about 10 or 15 minutes. It's not long, but each day now I decree and pray Psalm 91 over anyone who's on the call. And Psalm 91 has one particular provision that says about God protecting you from pestilence. And that's what this is a pestilence. And he says, 1,000 may fall at your left, 10,000 at your right, but it will not come near to you. So I'm someone who teaches and practices decreeing and speaking what God's word says. And I believe that when you speak and decree his word, that thing becomes established. That's just one of my main faith principles. And it's how I do my prayer life. So this has made me search the scripture for more of the promises of God and more declaration and decree of what that word says in my prayer life. And those are the kind of things that allow people to have enough courage to leave their home and go to the grocery store or do what they need to do in life, because now it's putting your faith into practice. That's what it is. So those are the main ways that it's changed. But I think in a lot of ways, it's what we thought was a completely negative situation has really been turned into several positives.
Do you find that people in the pandemic, do you find people are you having trouble? Are people coming to you saying, Bernie, I feel like I'm losing faith in God because, it feels like, how could God let something like this happen? Sort of like maybe the parallel of medicine is, how can we be, a modern developed country and science and medicine can't solve this problem? Like, I have people, as you might imagine, emailing me all the time, like, what is wrong with science and medicine that we can't figure this out? And then people questioning science and medicine. I'm getting a lot of people who are smart and intellectually gifted and paying attention and who are questioning the basic principles of science and questioning facts. So like, what do you say to people who are questioning these kind of fundamental values that you believe in?
Well,
it's a quite tough question to answer.
It is, but it's a good question. And so certainly with and the reason I'm giving a little pause is because it's a question that needs to be answered from the perspective of someone of faith and someone who is purely secular. And so for the faith community, I would say, again, this is putting your faith into practice. We read things in the Bible. We have stories that are told to us, and we have theology, right? We have great understanding, a lot of people, of the stories in the Bible. But the challenge is those stories aren't really about those people. Those stories are about how God intervened in those people's lives. It's more a story about God than it is about the people. But it's illustrative because it helps us understand what God will do in a situation that we face similar to what we read in those stories. So it's taking what is theology and turning it into praxis, in a practice. I said praxis because there's the Greek word for practice. But there's orthodoxy, which is the teaching part, the doctrine part. But then there's also orthopraxy. It's how are you practicing and living out those principles. And so for anyone who's of faith who's become discouraged in it, I would say you're not unlike a lot of other people. There are times when you're going to be discouraged, but even when you don't have, and this is definitely something I've told people who have been a little weak in terms of faith, even if you don't have faith, try to have hope, because sometimes you just don't have what you feel like is enough faith. But if you're falling short of faith, just have hope. And I think hope can eventually push you into the place you need to be. But having hope is important as well. And so for people who are not in the faith community and would question, well, how could God let something like this happen? My question would really be, have you ever really given him a try in your life? Like, truly, have you ever really done that? Because, and this is something, Lucy, I think we can go over hopefully before we run out of time. But I have a counterpart to your mosh pit that I think is helpful. I think it could be helpful. But for people that haven't made that step of trying to really have their own personal relationship with God, that's what I would say I would offer. It is try to establish your own relationship with God, because that's what God wants. It's not that he certainly doesn't want this pandemic. And so one reasonably could say, well, if he doesn't want the pandemic and he's in control of everything, why is he letting it happen? That's a whole nother conversation for another day. And quite frankly, people that don't have certain spiritual eyes would never understand it in certain spiritual ways. So it's somewhat of a non-sensible topic with a lot of people. So, but for those who have a sincere desire to understand God, the way he thinks, the way he reveals things, the way he acts, then I would encourage that person to really try to find their personal relationship with him. He's not a distant God who doesn't care about what's going on. He really is close if you want him to be.
Well, maybe this is oversimplifying it, but you know, and there's not a perfect parallel to medicine, but I mean, I do think that things have a purpose, and it's not that it's not. So to me, when someone says to me, and again, there's not a perfect parallel to religion, but says to me, look, we've got, you know, it's 2020, we have all these advancements in science and technology. Like, why are people dying? And I mean, again, there's and why are people, why haven't we figured out this virus, and why don't we know more? I would say, well, you know, just like in life, there's a process, right? There's a process, and the process is sometimes extremely painful. It doesn't mean though there's not hope and faith and the ability to get to the other side. It just, sometimes it's a painful process in getting there.
Yes.
In science, there's no guarantee in science that it's going to be a quick, simple answer. Perhaps like in religion, it's not like if you pick the right door, like in The Price is Right, it's like the price is right, then you get the new car and everything's okay. It's not like, you know, just like in life. I mean, sometimes like when I'm choosing, take a patient who has incurable cancer, who there's no option to like not have cancer and be free of this disease. You're choosing between, you know, this challenging reality of, you know, a shorter life, or this challenging reality of taking a chemotherapeutic drug that is going to have side effects. So it's not that science is failing us. It's not that we aren't smart enough, good enough as doctors or, you know, researchers. It's that is the reality, and the struggle is part of the process. And that's the word. And it's it's a process, and it's not always pretty, but it also shouldn't be, sort of like theoretically. Like, I mean, it shouldn't be. I mean, since when is everything? But process, I think process is really, I think, where we can draw the parallel, because process. We may have. I was trying to explain this to Houston, our 9-year-old, a couple weeks ago, when he was saying, "Why don't they have a vaccine? This should be over." Yeah. And I said, "Well, it's a process." I said, "You know how you take your inhaler when you're having trouble breathing?" I said, well, they didn't always have those. They had to develop that and use processes that are involved in science and medicine to get all the way to the point now where you know that if you're having trouble with your asthma, you can take a couple of puffs and then you feel better. But it took a process to get there. And so same thing with faith, in a sense, especially during times like this. Faith is not true faith if it's not tried in the process. It's just not. It's theory. It's what you claim you believe, but not until you're faced with a particular problem and you then address it with your faith, and then hopefully see the result or solution that you're desiring. Only then is that faith that's something that is pure. So that's when the faith is the little pump of albuterol, right? It's going through the process, and now I know it works because we've been through this process of getting it there. And I think that's kind of very similar to what we're talking about in terms of faith and what it really is, and how we communicate it. I think like one of the things I have the most faith in is the power of the human spirit. And whether, you know, and in a non-religious way for the moment, what I mean is, I mean, whether it's religious or not, I mean, the human spirit, I mean, I don't know what, I mean, but I'm just saying that I mean, like you just described, you've seen miracles happen. I mean, I see people who have had, you know, incredible traumas in their lives, you know, sort of dig deep and drill down into those really, really uncomfortable parts of their lives and kind of grapple with them and wrestle with them and go through hell and back, and then come out on the other side and be stronger, and then be healthier, and then educate other people and be a mentor in their community. I mean, that to me is like, that is incredible. And so what is my point is that one of the reasons I think I am inspired, perhaps like you are, in the pandemic is because I have this faith in the power of the human spirit. And when you see people being tested like this, because it's such an enormous test of people's endurance and their core values, and that I do think, like, I do have faith that people, like, the people they're incredibly resilient at the end of the day, and that when people really face vulnerabilities, that they can find strength they didn't even know they had.
And I agree with that. Yeah.
And then on a personal level, like, you know, before the pandemic, or, you know, or in a time where things are sort of like, you know, reasonably steady in your life, you know, my job is interesting, it's rewarding, it's gratifying, but, you know, like every job, there are downsides. Like, this pandemic to me has been the most intellectually challenging, rewarding time.
Yeah.
Which sounds weird to people who are like, wait a minute, but, you know, 150,000 people are dead. We're dealing with racial injustice and this, I mean, the spotlight on it, not that it's new, but
yeah,
all of the emotional devastation, the economic devastation, like, how could you be like happy? Well, it's because, like, my faith in human beings and my faith in the practice of medicine and the power of the human spirit to rise during crisis is being tested, and I'm seeing it happen. I'm seeing it happen. When on a sunny day, you don't have to test your faith in the human spirit. It's like, okay, you know what I mean? It's like, but on a rainy day, it's like, that's when you see,
when it rains for 4 months.
When it rains for 4 months and it's raining misinformation and, you know, tragedy, you're like, wow, okay, it's on. Like, this is when you can actually see what you believe in your core heart of hearts to be true about human beings, that we can get through this. And I'm witnessing that happen, but, you know, you're also witnessing trauma at the same time. So it's, anyway, now I'm just rambling, but what I'm saying is,
but I think the suffering and the challenge really does develop character.
Yes.
And you see what's in you, and you see what's in people around you. And the hope is that even if you found some areas lacking in your own character, or who you thought you were in this type of crisis situation, then now that we're 3 or 4 or 5 months into it, you just hope that on, say, day 120, you're better than you were on day 2. It's like just trying to grow and be better and learn more and understand that the challenge is real. And there weren't very many people, and this is a whole other conversation, but and probably a different interview context, but there were only a couple of people who in the circles that I listened to, that had what I would call a prophetic inkling that the world was going to face some kind of major crisis. And there's a certain prophetic voice that I've come to listen to at times, and he clearly said that within the first 4 months of 2020, everything that can be shaken is going to be shaken. And no one, though, knew exactly what that meant in terms of, well, how's that going to happen? Most people didn't even believe that it was going to happen, but it wound up coming to pass. But I say that to say that normally we don't know that these things are right around the corner. We don't know. And so there is a part of us that, I don't want to say enjoys, because that can,
that's
I think,
right,
be, it can just be misinterpreted.
yes.
But there are, let's just say there are certain benefits in terms of gaining wisdom from the experience of the challenge.
That's
and in
it.
that sense, that is something that is enjoyable. Like, once you obtain that wisdom, that's something that's positive, not that you like to have to go through what you have to go through to get there, but there are some good things that can come from these crisis situations.
I think there are. I mean, it's again, it's you can't. You have to, when you say opportunity, you have to be careful, because there's opportunity for suffering and loss, and not even opportunity. We are seeing suffering and loss everywhere, but I do think this is an inflection point in history where I'm hoping, because I do believe that good outweighs evil, that we are going to take a hard look at the problems in our culture and society. We have laid bare, I mean, you know, so many problems, from the healthcare system to systemic racism to, I mean, there's every problem that we face as human beings has been exposed.
Yes.
In a raw, ugly, but very real way. And so I still have faith and hope that we are going to rethink some of these things and come out stronger. But
Lucy, I think the big challenge with that, though, kind of goes back to one of the first questions you asked.
Yeah.
It goes back to leadership, because
yes, it does.
We don't know generally who we can trust for accurate, truthful information. We don't know, because most stuff that we hear on the radio or see on television is opinion masquerading as news.
Yep, you're right. It's entertainment even, right?
It is. And so to have hope, but I do have hope for all of those issues. But you don't get there until you can deal with truth. Until you can have not an alternative set of facts, just truth. Until we have that, then we're not going to get there, because, and this is the discouraging part about not just the political stuff, but even as it's manifested in the virus situation, is people on both sides, if there are only two sides, people on both sides really believe the information that they are getting.
Oh yeah. And
they completely disbelieve the other side's rendition of it.
Yep.
So how do you really know what, and I think that's one of the great things I liked about your mosh pit, because it was, I think what the I is what information and facts.
Yes.
Where you've got to find somewhere to get information and facts from a source that you find trustworthy. And that's a big part of the problem in terms, I think, of controlling this pandemic. If we could just have unspun facts, then it could go a long way. Because if you have people walking around without masks in Walmart, that should be a crime now. That should be a crime. And it's no different than,
I think it should. I
it's
think
no
we need to have
different
a
than the
national
seatbelt
mask
laws.
mandate.
It's nothing different than seatbelt laws. It's
That's
the
right.
same thing. And the seatbelt is meant to save you, whereas the mask is to save you and other people. So I think it's within government's power to mandate that. But, just like the whole seatbelt thing when initially came out, there were thousands and hundreds of thousands of Americans that said, well, I'm free. I don't have to do that.
It is
write them a
interesting
ticket.
to
Give
think
them a
about.
ticket.
Yeah, to think about what does it take to make major cultural shifts like that? Like, you probably, I remember going on airplanes when they're like, okay, the smoking section is row 25 to 35, and like, but if you're in row 24, even though it was non-smoking, it's not like
you're still smelling the smoke.
Yeah, but it was, but like that changed. I mean, I think sometimes it takes these horrible tragedies to really rethink how things go.
It's when enough people die. It's when enough people die.
And I agree with you. It's not, to me, it's not a political issue at all that masks work. I mean, it's just not, it shouldn't, there's no political agenda. There's nothing political about the facts that the respiratory droplets are the main source of
Take the
transmission.
intersection of all three. Take the intersection of medicine, faith, and politics.
Right.
In this example, if you're a lot of the same people of faith, so-called faith, who are of a certain political persuasion,
Yep.
are out there saying, I don't have to do this. I'm free. I'm an American. I believe in God. I believe in country. So that same person has to understand, from a faith context, at least from the faith or tradition that I come from, which is what most Americans claim, is that faith has to then make you concerned truly about your fellow human being. So even if you have a right to do something, then if you're living this faith that you claim you have, then you know what? You would wear a mask. You would wear a mask, because your droplets can infect this person who might not be able to really, doesn't have the physical ability to survive if it develops into that disease. So just out of love for your neighbor, you should be doing this. Yet these same people talk about, I don't want to get into a whole debate, but I find it fascinating that people like to have these big political discussions and demonstrations about, free choice or right to life. And you're talking about right to life in one sense, which I get, but you don't want to do something as simple as wearing a mask to actually protect and preserve life. Those kinds of inconsistencies bother me at my core, and for no political reason, but just because it
doesn't make sense. It doesn't actually
make sense.
It doesn't make
sense, and it's not consistently applying this faith that you say that you have. And so that was a bit of a tangent, but
no, it's not tangential, because it's affecting people's lives. It's affecting the death toll in this country. And I think the problem there is, there are a lot of problems there, but one of them is that the people who are not wearing the mask in Walmart, if maybe you're believing a different set of scientific facts, because if you actually believe the facts, and
then you still don't do it, then you're just a bad person.
So I think that there's just not a belief in the facts. And so how do you and I, as people who believe in facts and believe in human beings and are agendaless, of course I have intrinsic bias. I have bias, we all have biases, and I'm trying to be more and more aware of my biases, my blind spots, although I can't say blind spot anymore, because that's apparently not, I can't, I'm trying to get anyway, the point is I'm trying to be aware of my biases, but as a physician and as a person who believes in myself, I'm trying to be agenda free when it comes to taking care of people. The goal is, in your work, is to take care of people.
Mm-hmm.
How do you convince people of facts? Because at the end of the day, people can say, well, you have an agenda, you have bias. How do you become someone that people believe?
In that way, we're no different, because you do have an agenda, in the sense that, or you have a goal. You have an agenda of helping people be well. I have an agenda. I do. It's a specific agenda to draw people to God through Jesus Christ. That's my agenda. That's my life. So how do I convince someone to come on board with that faith? I can't convince them of anything. I can present them with what I believe the facts to be, and they make their own individual choice as to whether they want to accept that and pursue it, or reject it and not. And to the extent they accept it, that brings my heart joy. To the extent they reject it, there's a certain part of me that brings grief. But at the end of the day, you're a human being with a free will to believe or not believe whatever you want to believe or not believe. But we see the danger of that when you come to these types of situations, when this pandemic has swept through the entire world, and we in America have been so isolated from so many things. This is the first time in the history of the world where people in other areas have seen pandemics, epidemics, and people have died. In Africa, they see it frequently,
Yeah.
right? In other parts of the world, and Southeast Asia, I guess they've seen things too. But now that it's hit home, like you said, it's really exposed a lot of inadequacies, or inadequacies is a good word, I think.
It's a gentle word. It's a diplomatic word. It's a generous word.
Yeah, in our systems, but those inadequacies become exacerbated when you couple it with ineffective leadership, dishonesty, improper motive, those types of things.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting, and then I'll let you go, Bernie. But one of the ways that it's so interesting how human beings are, and I count myself a human being as well. So I'm not
good.
But is that as someone who's trying to, as you said, take care of people without any sort of political agenda or ulterior motive, and trying to kind of to lead, people are interested in people who I don't know, people who are new to reading my blog or newsletter or whatever. I think people are interested in my resume, but I think more than my resume is that what I'm getting at is what it takes to convince someone to believe you. Is not so much where I went to school, but one of the things I've noticed, and I've noticed this in my life before the pandemic, but particularly now, is when you are vulnerable yourself. So when you show people you're not holier than thou, or that you're not, you're just like everybody else. I believe that. Just because I have a medical degree doesn't mean I have some. It doesn't mean I'm not. It doesn't mean I'm not a vulnerable person and have flaws, imperfections, and that I struggle every day with various things maybe different from this person or this person, but there are struggles, right? Yeah. And so I think one of the ways that you can convince someone of your truth, or try to, because of course not everyone's going to believe you, and that's fine, is to as you said, lead by example. But also lead by demonstrating your own vulnerability, because at the end of the day, if you can't relate to people, no one's going to buy anything you're saying. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And that's it's one of the things I try to do in my vocation is I try to be transparent with people and let them realize, just because I may have on a robe on Sunday morning doesn't mean that I've gotten it all right. And usually you can probably point to Sunday morning before getting to church, or Saturday night before going to church, or Erica probably remembers something on Tuesday at 3:00. I don't know. Yeah. But you have to, I think when you're transparent, then it shows people that you're genuine. And I think people respond to that.
Well, I think that's why people respond. I think that's why people respond to you, because you're relatable, and you're not trying to hold the moral high ground. You're just
and that's one of the great things about at least my faith. It's you don't have to be perfect, and if perfection was required, then I would have been excluded. Period.
Oh my gosh! Amen. Hallelujah. If perfection was required, and if I did everything exactly right, and then first of all,
you practice medicine, right? You practice medicine.
It's practice, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, people don't want to hear that when they're getting it. The insurance companies don't want to hear it. You want to get it right and that kind of thing. But it's the process. We're all going through it. We don't have all the answers. But I think, getting back to what your point is, if you're transparent, and also I think what you're getting at too is an element of humility goes a long way. It goes a long way.
So humility is what I'm getting at, is that I mean, I question all the time, like, what gives me the right to dispense information? I mean, I have a medical degree. I studied a lot. I spent a lot of time in
If
libraries
you
and
don't
like,
have a right, if you don't
and
have a
not
right to
going
do
on
it,
dates and like,
then we're
no,
without hope.
I mean, but like, I don't feel entitled to any sort of like,
So
I'm,
let me tell you a story. You just made me think of something, and I know you probably have to go, but
no, it's great talking to you. I could talk to you all day. There's so
this
many
is
other, there's so many other side conversations I want to have that
yeah,
we'll do
and
another time.
I welcome that. So my freshman year of college, so I come home in May, and my dad gets up and goes to work, and he says before he leaves, he says, okay, the John Deere tractor that we have out in the country, it had the snowplow on it for the winter, and so my dad said, by the time I get home, make sure you have the snowplow off and put the mower deck underneath of it so you can start cutting the grass. Okay, no problem. So I mosey on maybe 11 or 12 o'clock and take off the snow blade, no problem. And I am just completely stuck on getting the mower blade underneath. I just could not get it. So here I am at like 5 o'clock, 7 hours, 6 hours after trying to get the whole thing done, and I still can't get it done. Now, mind you, when I woke up that morning, I was excited because, here I am at Duke. I made the dean's list, and I'm really feeling good about myself. And so my dad comes back, and he sees me still struggling with it, and he says, well, when did you get started? I said, oh, I've been working on this morning. And he says to me, you mean to tell me I just spent, whatever it was back in 1990, I just spent all that money, you make the dean's list, and you can't even do this? And he just walked in the door, and I felt that small. But it was his way of humbling me.
Yeah.
To say to me, look, you're no better than the next person who doesn't have your opportunities or who doesn't have your so-called success. You're no different, and you have to always remember that kind of thing. And I do. I remember that story over and over again, that just a little bit of humility really goes a long way. And I think when you're transparent and humble, then it also helps you tell the truth a little bit easier too.
Well, it's true. And one of the best parts of my job is when just in a one-on-one basis, like just sharing little bits of myself that sometimes I'm shy about doing because I don't want to make a patient-doctor encounter at all about me, right? But if I can help somebody kind of get over the hump, I'll just reveal a little bit about myself. Then they're like, oh, and then I can see that makes them think differently. I'm like, and usually it's not something like, oh, guess what? I ran a marathon. It's more like I did this. I'm telling them something that reveals my imperfections and flaws. Do you know what I mean? I'm not talking about like bragging. I'm talking about, and they're like, oh, okay, well, so anyway, my point is that sharing yourself just enough can be valuable on both sides. So anyway,
I think so.
I'm going to let you go, Bernie, because you've been so fun to talk to.
Thank you.
I also think so. We're going to come tonight.
Oh, are you? No, I sent you an email though.
Okay.
So I'm actually not going to be at that site. I'm actually now going to be on MLK Avenue in Southeast.
So
DC.
who's going to be on MLK Avenue in Southeast?
We'll see. Other than me and the two ministers I'm taking with me, there will be people.
So
I'm just not sure how many.
If you were us, where would you go to get the most? Like, because this is a.
Here's the challenge.
Yes.
The challenge is this was never advertised as, say, a demonstration type event.
Yep.
Or in some ways it is a social protest, but this is really a community of faith leaders who said, we need to honor Dr. King's dream by going to every MLK park, monument, street in America and pray. So it's really a prayer vigil. So the first hour is silent.
Yes.
It's silent prayer. So
6:01 to 7:01.
Yeah, and any of the from 6 to 7, and then 7 will be more, it can be oral prayer, it might be worship, depending on what happens where you are. There's no set program for how people are supposed to do it. I was originally asked to go there at the MLK Memorial, and that was my intent. But this morning I was talking to my father, and he finally came clean in terms of how concerned he is that I'm going there and there might be a whole lot of people, and then I've got to come into his house and he has his underlying conditions.
Fair enough.
So I wrestled with that. Talk about that. That's a whole nother, oh my gosh, I've wrestled with that today. But in order to still do what I said I was going to do, I am not going to go to the memorial, because once you're there, you just don't know how many people will show up.
You have no idea. Yes.
And there's also a permit issue, because no one pulled permits for these things. And at least on the monument grounds, you've got to have a permit unless you're 25 or less. And the plan was always to have less than 25. It was supposed to be a handful of people, most likely. But it seems like it's been growing in terms of the response. So my guess is there are going to be more than just a handful that show up at the monument, at least, at the memorial, I should say. So for you, it's closer to go there, or you just,
we might go. Stella expressed some interest. Erica and Nelson, they're not going to go.
No, they're not, because I was going to be at the memorial. Nelson wanted to go, and when his mother said, no, you can't go because there might be a larger crowd, he was so bummed out. So if I tell him, hey, Stella made it there, he's going to be really mad at his mother.
Well, don't need to tell him.
No. But the thing is, I think that it's interesting that you said that, because Erica said to me, she's like, you know what? The same conversation you were having with your dad, think about the conversations that other people have, young people, with their parents about things that they want to get involved in. Let's say they want to go to a protest, but it's in the middle of this pandemic. What do you say to them?
Oh, we had those conversations. I mean, Henry, who just graduated from STA, went to, all the protests, and we had these hard conversations about it. I mean,
what do you do? Because you don't want to quench what they have in them to do, and what they feel like they can do to learn and to make a difference, whatever it might be. But that's the reality. So I am going to be most likely at 1800 MLK Avenue Southeast, most likely. But if that crowd starts to grow, then I'm taking the other two ministers from my church to another location on MLK Avenue somewhere. Just because I'd disclose it to you. But I don't want to.
You need to protect yourself and your family. I mean, I
said to my dad, I said, look, it's actually got to be a smaller number of people, and all the protocols are in place. It's required that you're wearing a mask. So I started thinking about mosh pit. It's like mask, outside, 6 feet apart, or social distance.
Social distancing.
And hand washing once you get done.
Bring your Purell. Yeah.
Personal and public responsibility. I know them all. Information and facts.
So good. You're so good.
And talk with your doctor. So it's like, I told him I'm doing all those things, and he said, but we still don't really know.
Absolutely. We still don't really know. And the stakes are high and your relationship also matters too. He wants to trust you and have faith in you.
Yeah. My relationship matters, and that I need to be obedient to what he wants me to do.
You need to be obedient. I mean, look what he said to you about.
Almost, at 48 years old, it's like,
oh my God, so you're still his son. So like, there's a lot there at
I
stake.
am his son, and for the last 5 months, I've been eating his food, and he hasn't required anything other than for me to just be his son.
So that's another factor that you can't take for granted. You just got to do what dad. You got to do what dad says, no matter what the facts are.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So Erica was encouraged when I told her that you could actually potentially be there. She's like, oh, well, then you're probably safe.
Oh yeah, as if I have some magical ability to protect those that I care about.
But it's what you've said all along about reasonable calculation to you.
Yeah, you just
what's reasonable to you in terms of risk calculation.
That's it. So, and you make the calculation and live with it.
Yeah. So when I find my spot, I will. It'll probably be 1800 MLK Ave Southeast. But when I find my spot, then I think I've got Dad's cell, so I'll text him exactly where we're going to be, and I'll know around 5:30.
I think we'll go to the memorial. I mean, it's actually like going to be a pretty night, and you know, we're gonna, and if it seems scary or like too many people, we'll reassess.
Yeah, and it should be fine though. And I think it would be good just to be there and witness it. So
yeah, this is, you know, you forget sometimes we live in Washington D.C. It's like it's like a 5-minute drive to this incredible place.
I was there last Saturday just praying with some of the other people, and one of the people that I was there that I met for the first time is this Jewish guy who's a believer in Jesus. He's a Messianic Jew, and it's like, yeah, we do live in DC. There are so many different people that can still find common ground. So there's the hope.
There's the hope. Oh my God,
well,
Bernie, you're
thanks,
the best.
Lucy. This has been fun. I appreciate.
Oh my gosh, so much fun. I want to have more. When we can actually get together in person, when it's safe. I mean, I can't get to hug people, get together with people, and like be talking more in person because there's a lot more to talk about.
Well, after I drop the boys off at school, I know where you live.
Yeah, you do. Okay, bye. Say hi to Erica.
Okay. Have a great afternoon.
Bye. You too.
Thanks.